My name is Malik, and today I will be your narrator, especially for the Red Beret channel. What you are about to hear is not a political story or a war chronicle. It is a story about a son and a mother, about a secret she carried her whole life and the final message she left behind. A message that changed everything. He found it a week after her funeral, hidden behind an old photo frame, a folded paper, yellowed by time. 5 sentences. But those 5 lines would change his understanding of who he was and who she had been. It wasn't the grief that broke him. It was the truth in her handwriting and the last words she ever wrote to her son. Before a letter can change a life, before 5 sentences can shatter the foundation of everything a man believes, there must be a life to hold those beliefs in place. And Ibrahim Traore'S life was built not on wealth or privilege, but on the unshakable foundation of one woman, his mother. Her name was Awa. She was never a name the world would remember, never a face to grace newspapers or statues. But to him, she was everything. Awa raised Ibrahim alone. His father had died, at least that's what she told him, when he was just 6 years old. One moment he was there and then he was gone. No funeral, no body, just a story of a road accident and a deep, impenetrable silence that followed. And so it was his mother who became his entire world. Their home was small, a low cement house with a zinc roof that rattled whenever the wind blew too hard. The walls were cracked, the floor hard. At night, they shared a single mattress when times were difficult. Awa worked as a janitor in the local medical center. She wasn't a doctor. She wasn't even a nurse. She cleaned the floors after surgeries, swept the blood off the tiles, changed linens soaked in sweat and fear. Every morning she tied a cloth around her head, picked up her metal bucket, and left the house before sunrise. She returned late, her arms sore, her hands smelling of bleach. But no matter how tired she was, she always sat with Ibrahim before bed. She asked about school, helped him with lessons, listened to him dream. She never raised her voice. She never complained. She was quiet, serious, but there was a deep warmth in her silence. She carried herself with dignity, even when she was worn thin. Ibrahim remembers how she would gently blow on his food before handing it to him, even when the food was cold. How she would give him the better piece of yam, saying she wasn't hungry, though he knew she hadn't eaten all day. He remembers the way her fingers trembled when she counted coins in the market, how her voice never trembled when she spoke to him. She made being strong look simple, but even as a boy, he could feel it, that there was something hidden behind her eyes, a heaviness she never explained, a sadness he didn't yet understand. Ibrahim grew up believing his father had died heroically. Awa had told him that. She had said he died helping others in a crash, and Ibrahim had carried that image with him like a shield. He imagined his father as brave, as selfless, as good. That story shaped him. It gave him a kind of pride that helped him stand tall when other boys mocked his worn shoes or his empty lunchbox. When he won a school prize, he would look up at the sky and whisper, "I hope you see me, Papa." And every time he said those words, Awa would smile softly, but never say anything. Not once did she correct him, not once did she tell him the truth. She encouraged him in everything. She saved coins in a tin under the bed to buy his school books. When he passed his secondary exams, she sold her last piece of gold jewelry to buy him a school uniform that wasn't second-hand. When he enlisted in the military, she gave him a quiet nod and packed his bag with care. And every time he returned home on leave, she would prepare his favorite dish, sit with him late into the night, and ask if he was eating well, if he was sleeping enough, if he was safe. She never asked about medals. She never asked about politics. She only asked if he was okay. But there were moments, brief, fleeting, when Ibrahim caught her staring out the window, a distant look in her eyes, her lips slightly parted as if on the edge of a confession. Once, when he was 15, he asked her if she ever missed his father. She froze for a second too long. Then she turned and said, "Every day." He believed her, and in her way, it was the truth. She did miss him, but not because he had died, because he had left. Still, she never faltered. She never let the weight of that truth touch him. And so he became a man raised by a myth, a son built by a mother's silence. He carried his mother's dignity into everything he did. When he rose through the ranks, he often said, "My mother made me, not the army." And though he was admired for his courage, for his ideals, for his clarity, none of that surprised anyone who had met Awa. She had passed it down to him like inheritance. Except this inheritance came wrapped in restraint, in quiet sacrifice, in unspoken grief. And that's why, when he found the note, when he read the truth hidden behind the myth, his world didn't just tremble, it cracked. Because the woman who had taught him everything had also hidden the most important truth of his life. She had carried it, protected it, preserved it, and only revealed it after she was gone. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized she hadn't betrayed him. She had protected him. She hadn't lied to hurt him. She had chosen peace over bitterness, hope over hatred. And now, as he sat in her room, surrounded by her scent and her silence, he began to understand. Her greatest lesson wasn't in what she said. It was in what she chose not to. It was a quiet afternoon, the kind where time seems to slow down just enough to make grief louder. The sun was beginning to slip behind the rooftops, painting the modest home in tones of amber and stillness. Ibrahim sat alone in his mother's room. The bed was still made the way she had left it. Her slippers were tucked neatly under the corner, untouched. The scent of her shea butter lingered in the air like a memory refusing to fade. Her absence echoed louder than any sound. He hadn't moved much since the funeral. Friends and officials had come and gone, offering their condolences, their prayers, their polite silences. But Ibrahim had remained in this house, in this room, in this stillness. He wasn't ready to pack her things. He wasn't ready to close the chapter. And part of him wasn't ready to accept that she was truly gone. It was strange how death rearranged the way a room felt. The same chair suddenly felt empty in a different way. The window she used to look out from now seemed to hold secrets instead of sunlight. That afternoon, Ibrahim's eyes fell on a photograph, a faded black and white picture of his mother holding him as a toddler, standing beside a man he had always been told was his father. The image was stiff, awkward. His mother wasn't smiling, just gazing at the camera with a kind of tension Ibrahim had never noticed before. His father looked like a stranger. The frame itself was old, the back covered with brown paper that had begun to peel slightly. Without really thinking, Ibrahim picked up the frame and turned it over. The paper was heavier than it should have been. His fingers instinctively searched the edges. That's when he noticed it. Taped beneath the backing was a small envelope, slightly discolored, sealed and fragile. His heart skipped. He peeled it away gently, careful not to tear the paper. There was no name on it, just one word written in the familiar slant of his mother's handwriting. A single word. You. His hands trembled. He stared at the envelope for a long time before he opened it. Inside was a single sheet of folded paper, yellowed with age, but clearly written with care. No corrections, no hesitation, just 5 short sentences. My son, I never told you the truth about your father. He didn't die in an accident. He chose to leave. I didn't tell you because I wanted you to grow up with strength, not bitterness. If you ever feel lost, know this. I never lied to protect myself. I lied to protect you. That was all. 5 lines. 5 quiet detonations. Ibrahim sat back in his chair, eyes wide, mouth slightly open. His chest felt tight, like the air had been pushed out of the room. He read it again, then again, And again, each time the words sank deeper. His father hadn't died. He had left, walked away, abandoned them. And his mother had known. She had known the whole time. She had chosen not to say a word, not to let that pain shape his childhood, not to allow the story of a man's betrayal to become the foundation of her son's identity. The betrayal wasn't hers, it was his father's, but she had carried it like it was hers to own. She had turned it into a myth, wrapped it in a lie meant not to deceive, but to shield. She had rebuilt a broken truth into a beautiful story so her son wouldn't grow up feeling unwanted, so he wouldn't carry the shame of being left. She had offered him pride instead of pain, and now, with her gone, she had finally passed the truth to him, not in anger, not with bitterness, but in calm, measured words. Words she must have written years ago. Words she waited until death to release. Ibrahim folded the letter and placed it in his lap. He sat in silence, staring out the window she used to gaze through. He tried to remember every moment he had asked her about his father. Her silences now made sense. Her carefully chosen phrases, her long pauses, her deep sighs after he'd fallen asleep. The story of a road accident had been her armor, the truth her wound. And still she had smiled. Still she had laughed with him, danced with him in the kitchen, held him close during thunderstorms, kissed his forehead before school. How much had she hidden behind those eyes? How many nights had she cried alone, wishing she could tell him but deciding not to, for his sake? He pressed the paper to his chest and closed his eyes. Suddenly, every memory became brighter. Every small kindness she had shown now felt twice as large. Her silence wasn't just a silence, it was a sacrifice. And now that he knew, the weight of her choice settled over him, not as a burden, but as a gift, a heavy, beautiful, impossible gift. Later that evening, as darkness settled over the city, Ibrahim lit a candle in her room. He placed the letter beside it, not to burn it, but to honor it, to let it live in the space she once occupied. He wasn't angry. He was humbled by the size of her love, a love that had the strength to protect even through unspoken truths. The note didn't destroy the past, it deepened it, and in that depth, Ibrahim found something new, understanding. His mother had taught him many things while alive, but in her final words, she taught him the most powerful lesson of all. Sometimes the truth is not what we say, it's what we carry for others. And sometimes love doesn't shout, it whispers and it waits. The next morning, Ibrahim woke with the letter still beside him. He had barely slept. His thoughts had circled all night like birds without a place to land, looping through every memory of his childhood, every bedtime story, every time he had asked, "What was Papa like?" and received only a tight smile in return. Now, every answer he had ever gotten from her sounded different. Every silence thundered with meaning. The note had not just revealed a truth about his father, it had revealed a deeper truth about his mother. It had shown him the lengths she was willing to go just to protect the shape of his soul. Ibrahim dressed simply that day, in an old shirt she had once sewn for him. He didn't speak to his staff, didn't call any advisors. Instead, he walked to the old neighborhood where he grew up, back to the dusty street where the neighbors still swept their porches every morning with bundles of straw, and children ran barefoot chasing plastic balls. He stood outside the old courtyard, hands in his pockets, letting the past settle over him like sunlight. It was strange how small everything looked now. The walls seemed lower, the trees less tall. But in his memory, this place had been a castle. His mother had made it feel that way. He wandered to the market, the same one where she used to take him on Saturdays, bartering with worn coins and clever words, teaching him to choose ripe fruit by smell and fish by the clarity of the eye. Vendors recognized him, some shocked to see the president walking alone. He nodded politely, moved past them quietly, and stopped by an old stall where an elderly woman sat selling charcoal and dried okra. Her name was Maimuna. She had known his mother well, had sat with her many nights drinking tea and whispering about the cost of rice and the price of sorrow. When Ibrahim greeted her, her eyes widened, then softened. "You look just like her," she said. He smiled. "I came to ask you something important." She gestured for him to sit. There, on a rickety wooden stool, Ibrahim asked the question that had burned in his chest since reading the letter. "Did you know? About my father?" Maimuna hesitated. Her eyes drifted away. "We all knew," she said quietly. "He left, ran away with a woman from the next town, never looked back. Your mother, she never spoke of him again." Ibrahim felt something inside him deflate, not with pain, but with confirmation. "Why didn't she tell me?" Maimuna looked at him with the tired wisdom of someone who had buried more than just friends. "Because she didn't want you to carry his shame. She said, if he grows up believing his father died with honor, maybe he'll live with honor too." The words hit Ibrahim with the weight of 1,000 truths. His mother hadn't just chosen silence. She had rewritten history, erased her own pain, and handed him a version of life that would nourish him rather than wound him. As he left the market, he thought of how many people live their whole lives angry at the wrong person, bitter at shadows. He realized then that the truth, while necessary, is not always the most powerful tool. Sometimes love is, and his mother had wielded love like a shield. That evening, Ibrahim returned to the presidential residence, but he didn't resume his duties. He walked instead into the garden, where she used to sit on her rare visits. The garden wasn't extravagant, just a patch of green with sunflowers she had once admired. He sat on the bench where she had once told him, "Never become so powerful that you forget how to listen." He closed his eyes and imagined her voice, soft, firm, always measured. And he realized something deeper. She hadn't just hidden the truth to protect him. She had done it to shape him. Every choice she made, even the one to remain silent, had been for him. Later that night, he returned to her room. He lit the same candle. The letter remained untouched, but this time he didn't read it. He just sat with it. Let it be what it was. Her final conversation with him. Her last lesson. He whispered into the stillness, "I understand now, I do, and I forgive you for everything you carried alone." In that moment, something shifted. The burden didn't vanish, but it became lighter. Because he no longer saw the letter as a betrayal. He saw it as a final act of maternal strength. She had protected him when he was small, and now, with her truth, she was teaching him how to stand even taller. He stood up, folded the letter carefully, and placed it into a leather-bound journal he kept for things that mattered. He didn't lock it away. He left it open on his desk, a reminder, not of pain, but of purpose. His mother had hidden the truth, yes, but she had done it with intention. And now, knowing the full story, he didn't feel smaller. He felt whole. Because sometimes the deepest love does not come through words. It comes through the silence we choose to carry for those we would give our lives to protect. The following morning, Ibrahim stood before her grave with the letter pressed to his chest. There were no cameras, no guards, no national anthem playing in the background. Just him, the wind, and a handful of birds picking at dry grass between the tombstones. Her grave was simple. A plain stone, no gold, no exaggeration. Just her name, her birth and death, and a small phrase he had chosen himself. She loved in silence. He had never truly understood that line until now. Now it rang like a bell in his chest. He knelt beside the stone and placed the letter down, folding it carefully, anchoring it with a smooth river stone they had once found together when he was a child. He whispered words that didn't need an answer. "You did the hardest thing a mother can do. You told a lie not for your own comfort, but to protect the light inside your child. His voice trembled. You gave me strength without letting me know where it came from. You loved me so deeply. You rewrote my story to make it easier for me to live in it. I will never forget that. Ibrahim stayed there for hours, not crying, just thinking, remembering, watching the way the sun shifted over the earth she now slept in. For the first time since she passed, he didn't feel lost. He felt guided. The letter hadn't broken him. It had brought him home to her in a way he didn't expect. It gave him a reason to stand taller, not for the sake of image, not for politics, but for her. That night, as he returned to the residence, Ibrahim gathered his personal staff and told them to arrange a visit, quiet, unpublicized, to a shelter on the city's edge. A place for single mothers, widows, and women escaping abuse. A place no president had ever walked into. His advisors were confused, hesitant, but he was clear. I want to speak with women who carry their pain without applause, he said. Women like my mother. The next afternoon he sat in a circle of plastic chairs with 12 women and 3 toddlers playing on the ground between them. Some women avoided eye contact. Others looked at him defiantly. A few were crying before they even spoke. One by one, they told their stories. Of abandonment, of betrayal, of surviving things that had no names. Ibrahim didn't interrupt. He didn't speak. He just listened. At the end of the session, he said only this. My mother could have been any one of you, and if she were here, I think she would have told you that silence is not weakness, it's love holding its breath. From that day forward, Ibrahim began a quiet initiative. No billboards, no flashy campaigns, just action. He funded women's shelters anonymously, created scholarships for children of single mothers, sent money to clinics like the one where his mother used to clean. And every year, on the anniversary of her death, he visited one family, unannounced, and sat with them, ate with them, and told them, "You are seen." It was never filmed, never published, just done. But it wasn't just about honoring her memory. It was about changing his own view of leadership. He realized something he had never been taught in military school, never read in political books. Leadership was not about power. It was about presence. It was about choosing to sit with the wounded instead of hiding behind titles. His mother had led him long before he led anyone else, and her leadership had been quiet, fierce, and deeply human. One evening he spoke at a private gathering of young cadets. No press, no political figures, just future leaders still learning how to stand. He told them, "My mother once carried 2 jobs, raised me alone, and still made sure I went to bed with a full belly and a quiet heart. But I didn't know her strength until she was gone. Don't wait to see the heroes around you. Tell them now. Honor them now." And then he paused, eyes lowered for a moment, as if remembering something distant and sacred. She didn't ask for gratitude. She asked for integrity, and I intend to live by that. The cadets applauded politely, but one of them, a girl of 18 with a notebook in her lap, stood and asked, "Do you ever regret that she didn't tell you the truth earlier?" Ibrahim smiled gently. "No," he said, "because sometimes the truth comes exactly when we're ready to hold it." That answer stayed with the cadets long after the speech ended, because it wasn't rehearsed, it wasn't polished, it was real. Ibrahim returned home that night, looked at the letter once more, and placed it in a glass frame, not to show off, but to preserve. Not on his office wall, but on the desk in the same room where she used to sleep. A quiet monument to a woman who never sought recognition. A final message from the person who had shaped him more than any general, any textbook, any ideology. The letter was not a confession. It was a legacy, and he intended to live by it, not as a president, not as a soldier, but as a son. The years that followed moved quickly, as they always do when the world begins to recognize the weight of your name. Ibrahim Traore'S image spread across newspapers, screens, and speeches. He was no longer simply a leader. He had become a symbol of hope, defiance, change. People studied his words, analyzed his decisions, speculated on his next move. But what they didn't see, what no title or headline could explain, was the transformation that had taken place within him. Not the soldier, not the president, but the son. The man who had read his mother's final words not as a revelation, but as a gentle earthquake that had reshaped everything beneath his surface. He continued his work with steady hands, but with a softer heart. He fought injustice, but with deeper empathy. He confronted corruption, but with more patience. He knew now that not every battle was meant to be won by force. Some were meant to be endured, some were meant to be understood. The note she had left behind had taught him that love does not always look like truth spoken loudly. Sometimes it looks like pain carried quietly. He began to speak more openly. Not about the letter, never about the letter, but about mothers, about sacrifice, about the invisible strength that holds up entire families, entire nations, and is rarely acknowledged until it's gone. In one televised speech on education, he paused before the closing sentence and said, "If your child sees a giant in you, don't tell them how tired you are. Let them climb on your shoulders. Let them see the stars." It wasn't a political line. It was something his mother had done for him every single day. He continued to visit her grave alone, without entourage, every year. One visit, the wind knocked the framed letter from the small stone he always carried it in. It fluttered in the grass and settled near a wildflower growing beside the headstone. Ibrahim knelt down, picked it up, and smiled. Even now, she still found ways to speak. She always would. But time, as it always does, began to press forward. New challenges rose, wars of economy, drought, shifting alliances. Yet no matter how complex the world became, Ibrahim had a compass now, a quiet, unwavering center rooted in the values of a woman who had chosen love over honesty, peace over revenge. He knew that her choice to lie about the man who left them wasn't a denial of truth. It was a protection of hope. And that protection had allowed him to become the man he was now. Years passed, and one day a young journalist sat down with Ibrahim for a rare personal interview. Not a press conference, not a policy discussion, just a conversation. The journalist asked, "You've faced revolution, betrayal, threats, but what moment truly shaped who you are today?" Ibrahim didn't answer immediately. He looked out the window for a long time, then said, "When I found a letter written by someone who loved me enough to carry the truth, so I wouldn't have to. That moment didn't just shape me, it freed me." Read. The interview aired days later, and it struck a chord across the country. Mothers wrote letters to their children. Children called their mothers. Something subtle and profound began to ripple through the people. Not just admiration for their leader, but reflection on their own stories, their own unspoken truths, the sacrifices made in silence all around them. And yet, for all the respect and influence Ibrahim held, he never let the letter become legend. It remained in the same glass frame, still on the small desk in her room, untouched by time. He never read it again. He didn't need to. It wasn't about the words anymore. It was about what they meant, what they had opened in him. He would sometimes sit in that room late at night, the window open, the candle flickering beside the frame, and listen to the wind whisper through the curtains. And he would imagine her voice, not scolding, not instructing, just present, like it had always been. In one of his last private speeches to a group of students, Ibrahim said, "We spend so much of our lives trying to uncover secrets, as if truth is always better than mystery. But I've learned that sometimes mystery is mercy. Sometimes not knowing the pain behind a person's eyes allows us to believe in their smile a little longer." My mother gave me the gift of that belief, and when the time was right, she gave me the truth too. Both were love. As the sun dipped behind the trees that day, he remained sitting there, eyes closed, not as a president, not as a leader, but as a son remembering. The final words she had written to him were not meant to explain. They were meant to protect, to prepare. And they had done both. Because when he faced the world now, he faced it with something stronger than courage. He faced it with understanding. And perhaps that was her greatest act. Not the silence, not the note, but the way she taught him that even broken things, broken homes, broken truths, broken hearts, can still raise something whole, something good, something that can carry nations on its shoulders. This is Malik, and this was her story. The story of a woman who held a secret for a lifetime and a son who was strong enough to receive it when the time came. If you are carrying something unspoken for the sake of someone you love, you are not alone. And if one day you find a truth buried beneath the years, know this: it's never too late to forgive, to understand, to begin again. And maybe, just maybe, one letter can still change the world, or at least one heart.